Hello again. My name's Ron Risley, host of the Halcyon Show. How are you doing? This is a weird one just because I started broaching the subject earlier. It didn't feel right for that particular broadcast, so I wanted to hop back on again, discuss it more specifically to what I was thinking about, and just try and get some of my more nebulous thoughts out because it's been bugging me. It was prompted by three separate things. None of them linked in any way other than the overarching theme of what we're here to talk about. So the first thing was I follow a lot of American pop culture as far as a lot of the late night stuff is concerned, just because I used to watch it a lot as a kid. Okay. So one of the things that caught my eye last week was the announcement, or the week before I should say, the announcement that Stephen Colbert's Late Show is being cancelled. That coupled with the South Park stuff, coupled with obviously the announcement regarding the Online Safety Act, and then leading on to one of the participants of my, I call it a social circle as far as battle rap is concerned, Cooper, and sort of the discourse surrounding that. So long story short, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the fact that we seem to be entering, at least in my experience, a new era of participation online, because ever more prominently we are being faced with it's hard to say otherwise, a tsunami of bombardment of not only information, opinion, but discourse, the way that discourse should be framed, the interpretation of things, how things are presented versus how they actually are, how you're encouraged to think about those things. The thing that kind of was the catalyst for me was the Cooper stuff, for wanting to talk about it, though. I felt strongly about a few things, but I haven't really felt the need to go, to hop on and talk about it. But the Cooper thing was interesting because what got me was, I can disagree or agree with Cooper regarding it. His standpoint seems to be that the regulation that's been brought in here in the UK regarding moderation of online content is overstepping the government's boundaries with regards to what they are doing versus what they are claiming to be doing, and that the idea of more government oversight that's delegated to private sectors is not inherently a good thing. Now, the spirit of that I can agree with. The notion behind it obviously is difficult because I come from an era where obviously, divulging your information. So, a quick backstory. When I first started experimenting with online social media, it wasn't on forums or anything like that. It was social media in its infancy in the form of Microsoft Messenger, Instant Messenger. It was an app for the younger viewers out there. It was an application that your computer ran, so you had to be on it. There was no such thing as a mobile version of this yet. And the idea was that you had people in your orbit, you save their, the character names, profile names, or whatever, and you could instant message them. That's it. They then brought in extra advents like, this webcam, if your internet could handle it. Microphones for a bit, you could share music, all the rest of sort of stuff. But the number one thing that I remember being taught when I was young was this notion of you cannot share your information online because that could be dangerous. Why, you might ask? Well, online predators were a thing that we weren't familiar with. When I was a kid, the notion of an online predator wasn't something that I was cognizant or aware of. Wow, that's bad. It's supposed to be an iced coffee that I made. I made it with decaf, though, to try and, keep my caffeine intake low, but just give me something cool and refreshing. That's fucking terrible. Tastes like burnt shoes. Oh, well. Never mind. But yeah, as far as MSN Messenger, so I remember being taught very young, like, you do not share your information. Fast forward to now, where effectively this particular the Online Protection Act, or whatever the devil it's called, is effectively demanding, not requesting, not suggesting, demanding that you present your personal information to verify how old you are and who you are before you're allowed to access certain aspects of online presentations, I guess, in the form of, I mean, the reason why Coupa is getting skewered is because it's the pornography element of it that's been sensationalized. It's this idea of, it's really the porn websites we're targeting here to protect young kids from being able to access these websites without really any protection. The interesting thing I find with that is what any defenders of that would have the biggest struggle in the world of doing is, dude, kids are going to do what kids are going to do. Diligent parents can go some way to mitigating and preventing certain exposures children might have. I'm a parent. Yeah, there are certain online features of some of the games that they're playing now that I'm deeply uncomfortable with, and I monitor pretty closely because I just don't trust it. There's also the mobile phone element. I'm deeply uncomfortable with most, even teenagers, frankly, but any children having access to a smartphone because of the variety of different things they could be exposed to. So I'm not immune from the argument that there needs to be some moderation when it comes to the internet, because largely speaking, when it was the Wild West, the internet was somewhere where it was very easy to be conned. It still is, but for different reasons. Instead of your money being at threat, or your location being at threat, really what's at threat now is your ability to be able to navigate the internet without first paying a premium and without disclosing information about yourself, which are the two things that we were, it's just ironic that we've kind of come full circle. You weren't at risk of losing money necessarily when you were a kid because you didn't have any in the service we were using were free. There was no such thing as an online transaction at the time. The only thing that I remember being around when I was a kid that you could have potentially been exposed to was eBay, and even then you needed card details. And of course, I was 13. I didn't have a debit card, and last I checked, eBay doesn't take cash. To now, where obviously every app, everything is quite happy for you to enter your information, store it for you, because of course that's nice and handy, so that you can, lose track of how much you're spending, so they can invariably get more out of you. They can change prices on a whim. That means that they can debit your account. I mean, it's become a meme, like, it's the old direct debit standing order thing where it's like, oh, there's my last £10, I need it for food, and then some fucking online thing debits it, and then suddenly you've got no money for food. But hey, you've got that online service for another month. Isn't that good? So to bring it back with what Coupa was saying, it's an extension of that too. It's the fact that now him raising a qualm about it gets dogpiled, and that makes me uncomfortable too. So without getting too wishy-washy, because I've kind of thrown a lot in there, why it was prompting me is because I decided I needed to start reading more, even if it was just on a very, very small scale, to try and prompt my my intellect into being curious again about certain things. One series of books I bought 3 of is the little book ofs. I got sociology, I got psychology, and then this is the most interesting one so far, a little book of philosophy. And the reason it's interesting is because it goes into not a ton of detail, but it certainly touches on an enormous amount of different aspects of philosophy over the eras of man. Basically, it goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. It touches on the Buddhist movements, the East Asian movements, and things of that nature. As you can tell, I've only gotten about a third of the way through the book yet. But one of the interesting things is the notion that ignorance, it's kind of the antithesis of a famous saying, actually. The famous saying is ignorance is bliss. Actually, what this book and what most modern and indeed Western philosophies would indicate is to the contrary, however, is that ignorance is a source of dissatisfaction and unhappiness. And I think if you consider that when looking at modern discourse and just how angry everybody is with everybody else, and how generally hard it is to form a consensus on anything because we're encouraged to split hairs on every little thing rather than agree on a general direction and fine-tune it as we go. And then factor that in with online discourse, which has been so encouraged for so long to be, you just orient it towards conflict and chaos, that we've now arrived at a point where it is so much harder to just have a conversation than I think it's probably ever been in my lifetime. Take Kupar as the example. I'm using him as because I could easily use myself as an example, and I probably will in a minute because it will link into what I was talking about on a previous stream. So all he was really doing was trying to articulate a point lightly initially, but a point he felt very passionately about, which is that this is something that should be fought, it should be, disagreed with, it should be, it should be at the very least put to a vote so that people can have a say. The pushback seemed to be people just lining up to dunk on him because of the extrapolation that he was only really, worried about the porn aspect. And maybe he is, by the way. Maybe he is. In which case, fair enough, dude. Like, I'm not here to dunk or hate on anyone for their opinion. What I find disconcerting is the fact that it's so much easier to think of things in terms of being able to dunk on people now rather than move conversations forward. So discourse doesn't evolve past an initial stage on social media, which would be fine if there was another platform or some other aspect of our society where there is the ability to be able to discuss things in a free-flowing yet receptive way. And I'm not sure that exists anymore. The reason I lay that in with the Colbert and the South Park stuff is because what you're seeing in America is more and more of this notion of people just flat out ignoring what they see because it benefits their current positioning within the social hierarchy of things to deny things. And now, but what you're also seeing is an overextension of that censorship in the form of Stephen Colbert. The accusation is effectively that he called a settlement that was paid by an organization to Trump as a political bribe, and that a week later he was cancelled due to financial reasons that had been long-standing. So the insinuation is that in America, at least, you're now getting to a point where freedom of speech is something that is being censored, but because people have a vested interest in the discourse as it is right now, which is that he who yells loudest is right, it's just something that's going to be passively accepted. Fast forward a week to South Park effectively daring Trump to sue them by going after him in the most egregious way possible. It made me happy for a second, but then you realize that one of the things that I really struggle with at the moment is the fact that it might just be a phase. It might just be something that comes and goes and passes without much fanfare. And so we arrive at a point now where I wanted to talk about my frustrations with it, because one of the things that I've tried to do over the course of my life is to always consider my impact on things, try and have a considered nature with things, try and see the other side of the coin, and always try and progress the situation. It's very rare for me to become entrenched in something. I've found too often in my life where I've needed to review things, and that entrenchment makes it difficult to do that with any kind of reasonability. But the trouble is that I think too many people are entrenched in their beliefs and their ideals now, that questioning them is not something that's, and not that I'm saying it was ever encouraged, but it was something that at least was open. Like that discourse and disagreement wasn't something that was actively avoided or discouraged in quite the way that it is now. Jeeves in the house. Hi, Jeeves. And I find that worrisome, because I think if you take Kupar as the example, Kupar, when he was trying to articulate the point that he wasn't being heard. It was people just being twats, basically. That's just kind of par for the course now. We're in a culture where trolling and banter and immediate reaction rather than concerted thought is the norm. And anyone that wants to try and articulate things in a more considered, long format way is ultimately going to be bombarded by people that, again, looking to just dunk on the person. I'm not here to say that Kupar, in this instance, made a particularly good argument, particularly bad argument, articulated it well or badly. What I am saying, though, is that watching his reaction, seeing everyone else's reaction, it made me sad because there wasn't really anyone seeking to engage with him on a meaningful basis. They were seeking to inflame the situation. I'll put myself in this because the Coldplay thing. That was funny, but then I realised that it became a situation where there were then a series of people looking to dunk even harder on it by going into the personal lives of these people, going into the personal lives of people surrounding them for clout and for stories. And that's even if this shit's true. And that's worrisome to me because, I mean, that situation shouldn't have been any more than just one of those awkward moments. It's like, oh, okay, he done fucked up, she done fucked up. I bet they won't ever do that again. It's kind of funny for a moment. Let's move on. There's an industry built around that fucking meme now. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that... With everything that's going on in the world right now, be it conflict, war, the widening wealth gap, the inability of some people to afford basic things, our own individual struggles with our sense of self, our philosophical standpoints on things, and that's the sort of thing that we're devoting our time and energy to. It's just very odd to me. And it's worrisome to me because it means, I mean, because even the reason I'm talking like this and the reason I'm not anticipating anyone watching this, by the way, is because I'd want more people to speak and think openly. I'd want more people to speak and have time to expand on what they think and feel rather than just trying to what we see more and more, which is this consolidation and this condensation of their ideas and thoughts into the simplest, most easy to digest, easily understandable thing, which ends up not being representative of how they really feel, which means that everyone then gets a misinterpretation of everybody else, and it means that people can't talk to each other anymore. Not really. So this is how I'm going to put myself in this. And this is why I get frustrated at the battle rap community for doing this in particular, although I will concede that it's not just an issue with their discourse. So obviously I had my thing a few years ago now. One of the things that I think gets misinterpreted by me is that I'm just naturally a very proactive person. When there's a problem, it's about moving forward. It's about fixing it. It's about dealing with it and moving on from it so that we can get back to a norm, right? What that means is that I don't really feel the need sometimes to hold pulling the trigger on something. I feel like it's just incumbent upon us to get on with it, move forward, let's go, right? Let's try and just deal with this, right? That was interpreted as me trying to get clout. That was interpreted as me trying to involve myself in situations that were nothing to do to me. There's a whole myriad of things, but the point is that no one ever really wanted to understand where I was coming from, and anyone that disagreed with me really just wanted to kind of paint me in a corner. Kupar is experiencing this to a certain degree now, albeit to a lesser extent, because of course there's still a light-hearted nature to his discourse. There's still kind of a jokey nature, whereas what I was being told repeatedly was that you don't get to have an opinion for these reasons, or your opinion is wrong based on my assumption of what you're saying rather than what I'm actually saying. I'll go further. When I was invited onto the spaces and I was attempting to speak for myself, I remember distinctly that it was treated with hostility, and I ended up being shouted down. The other person in the discussion, Trubs, just decided at one point to just yell at me to shut up. And the thing about that is that, again, I find that frustrating and worrisome because that was generally endorsed by that particular crowd on that occasion. And again, I find frustrating about it was Danny Jack then changed the name of the discussion from What is Halcyon Thinking to General Battle Rap Discussion in an attempt to try and undermine and dismiss the reason we were all there to talk in the first place. Now, I'm bringing that in because, largely speaking, I've come to accept that my place in battle rap now is to provide a platform for the people that would like to be interviewed by me, knowing what I do, which is to try and get into the weeds and try and understand people on a more deeper cerebral level. Like, I want to understand the how and the why rather than the what and the when of what they do. And that's fine. I've also come to accept that that's not for anyone. So one of the criticisms that was leveled at me during that time is this sense of entitlement. You feel like you're entitled to these things. There is probably an element of truth to that. At that time, I'd worked pretty goddamn hard to cover battle rap in a myriad of different ways that I felt like no one else was doing. And as a result, I felt like, well, you know, I'm not entitled. I don't know if I necessarily felt entitled, but I know I definitely felt like I've earned something. Maybe I'm not warranted a level of respect like a battler, and I'm still not, because I still haven't really contributed anything meaningful in terms of content to the scene beyond a couple of interviews that I've done reasonably well. But I think I'm owed something, because I am attempting to understand and present the scene in a way that no one else seems to want to, despite the fact that they're all complaining about aspects of the scene that need to change, that need to get better, that need to be reviewed, and yada yada yada. But again, I look at that now through the prism of, right, is that a problem just with battle rap discourse? Not even close, man. Not even close. Look at any general online discussion, and effectively what happens is just a degree of tribalism. It splits right down the middle. There's no attempt to reach consensus. There's every attempt to draw battle lines and then wage war in the comments, wage war on lines. You know, you pick a side, you attempt to argue the case for that side as loudly and as vociferously as possible while giving no concessions to your, quote, enemy, right? And this is where I part company with that notion, because, again, I have my disagreements with some of the people during my period online of having disagreements with people, but what I will always try and do, even if it's held against me, is to try and see the merits of the other argument being leveled against me, because I'm not really interested in that entrenchment anymore. Like I said, I'll still have things where I think, no, I was definitely right. That was definitely something I'm not willing to sort of cede ground on. But I can see the merits of this argument. Upon review, I can understand how someone would feel that way. It doesn't change how I think, but it certainly makes me more apprehensive to do a certain thing in the future, or to say a certain thing in the future. The trouble I find, though, is when you're the one constantly giving ground in an era where everyone isn't entrenched with what they're saying, it doesn't mean that they're willing to then hold that line. It's now progression forward. It's like, right, now we've got him. Now, you know what I mean? Which means that then there's every incentive to become entrenched yourself. Add this into this notion of now we're being told that we've got to identify ourselves online, that there's consequences and ramifications if we don't, in the form of a lack of being able to access the discourse in the first place, and yada yada yada. We're entering a strange era where not only is the discourse highly moderated, number one, already, it's dubious how legitimate it is half the time, because again, we live in an era where AI does exist, bots exist, and our exposure to it on a pretty consistent basis is making it difficult to understand who is actually saying what, who actually believes what, because we see things in such bite-sized ways now. Even a social media post online, I think the maximum you'll ever see really shared around is 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Just to put it into context, like, let's imagine you had a job interview and they said, right, the whole interview takes place in 2 minutes and you've got to sum up your career, sell yourself, and explain the context of everything that you've ever done better than your competitors can in 2 minutes. Go. Would you think that's fair? I would argue that you would probably think, well, no, I need more time because I need to add context, or I need to be able to articulate what I'm about to say a certain way, or yada yada yada, right? But we're not afforded that time at the moment. I would have loved to have had people on during a period of time last year when a lot of stuff was kicking off over in the UK. One of the things that I made a prediction on previously was this notion that there are a lot of people right now that hold opinions that they would rather not share. Or up until recently, I should say, they would rather not share because they were pretty sure they were going to be ostracized for them. Now, when it comes to racism, yeah, I'd rather not hear from you. But at the same time, I am understanding of the opinion that in order to fully address the idiocy of racism and the inherent flaws and the arguments of racism, you cannot do that unless there is discourse. You cannot defeat an argument unless you hear it in the first place. You cannot counter effectively a dissenting opinion without the opinion being expressed. What happens when you discourage that discourse or suppress that discourse is it manifests and presents in other ways. You saw that to a certain degree last year with the voting for the Reform Party, with the riots, because the thing about it is it's not a justification, but you have to understand where it comes from in order to deal with it. And again, the reason I'm saying that is because I'm not interested in the win and the loss. I'm not interested in joining a team and winning with that team. I'm interested in plotting a course forward where everyone survives and thrives. And anyone, at least this is how I feel, anyone that is attempting to invest and continue to hold on to the era that we're in now, in terms of how discourse is exchanged, in terms of how we view things, in terms of how we're presented things, and how we are allowed to express what we think and feel about those things, they're the people who I'd want to disagree with the most. Because at the moment, things are not healthy. It is very, very difficult to have a civilized conversation with anyone about anything before it becomes inherently hostile, or before you are demonized or villainized or undermined or victimized or any number of different things that people will seek to do to you, as opposed to trying to address your argument directly. Again, I'll put myself in this. I was yelled at, I was called names, I was dogpiled, any number of different things, but I don't remember a single person attempting to address anything I said until it became a matter of, right, let's do this on a podcast so we can present it a certain way. All right, fine. That's fair enough. At least that was an attempt, but that was an attempt by someone that I believe has a better head on their shoulders for this sort of thing. I was lucky in that respect. I still disagreed with a bunch that was said on the Prem did a podcast about it, and they said they mentioned me in it. It was something. It was when I was during my hiatus, and a friend of mine sent it to me and said you should really watch it, and I did. I appreciated the fact that they at least attempted to broach the subject. I was still annoyed by certain aspects of it that I found disparaging and annoying. But the fact is, though, I find the hypocrisy annoying because, again, I'm trying to be critically honest. I'm trying to ascertain what I believe to be the truth and then say it. If I was just looking to score points for people that hate, let's just take an example of I'd be relentlessly negative about And yes, I'm fairly critical of But the thing with that is that I would argue a lot of those criticisms are warranted and are widely held. I'm just expressing them. The difference, though, is if I see something or I hear something that I inherently agree with, or that I would like to be enthusiastic about, I don't want the fact that I've been critical to be able to preclude me from being able to say those things. It's the reason why, again, I've got my differences with people like Trubs, Koj, Frost. These are people that I dislike personally. However, if I can possibly help it, I will give praise to things that they do well, because that is the right thing to do. That's the way forward in terms of the discourse. Is at least you know my biases, so you can decide whether or not to accept them. But at the same time, hopefully I will garner trust by being able to do something like admit when I was wrong, being able to admit that I don't know something, being able to do a bunch of stuff. And this is the other thing, right? Because I already know now that there are people that will watch this, hear some of the things that I've said, immediately jump to a conclusion of something and discourage it. And this is why this is the part of the show that I need you to listen to, okay? Put yourself in my position in any given one of these circumstances. Imagine it's not about something as tedious or as menial as battle rap. Imagine this is about a politician, a social media platform, some aspect of life, okay, that you cannot avoid. And now let's say that you are not entitled to an opinion on it. You are not entitled to voice your dissent. You are not entitled to voice your disagreement. You're not entitled to express yourself positively or negatively for whatever reason, okay? We're entering that era now. Slowly but surely, we're entering an era where social media is going to be prized from most people as a means of being able to express yourself freely and openly. We're entering an era where even if you do express yourself freely and openly, you won't be afforded the time and the consideration to have your opinion really heard. And worse still, most of our opinions are going to be clouded by the fact that the information we're seeing and hearing isn't 100% right, because most people do not take the time to verify and double check anything. When I do my interviews and I do my live streams, I try and do at least some level of prep, because it's very easy for me to be able to opine on things when I've got all of the information. It's just a natural habit of mine and a proclivity of mine to seek information, because it's really annoying to me to have misinformation that I then spout. I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, today obviously I had incorrect information when it came to the Premier Battles Where Winning Matters tournament, because they changed some of the brackets. So I had to say, look, I'm really sorry. A lot of that might be wrong now, in which case disregard it. I apologize for it. What you don't do is, when you're held up as being wrong, or you are shown that there's an inconsistency with what you're saying, to deny it and then attack the person that brought that up to you, because that is what I see. The other thing as well is, by engaging with someone whose opinion you differ from, initially at least, by attacking that person, again, you are not promoting discourse. You're having an argument. No healthy relationship can be constantly predicated on arguments. There has to be an agreement at some stage or another where both parties at least try and hear the other person. Because what if it's just a miscommunication? What if it's just a misunderstanding? What if something has been spoken out of turn but that wasn't meant? There's a myriad of different things that need to be taken into consideration when we're talking to each other. And so much of how we talk to each other online informs how we deal with each other in real life, and the attitudes we adopt in real life. So now, seeing this new act being pulled in, and seeing all of the stuff that's happening in America at the moment, and the reason I pay such close attention is because we're a petri dish when it comes to America. Everything that happens over there tends to linger, it permeates, it makes its way over to here, it becomes our social norm in time. And that's why a lot of the stuff in America, sort of 2016, 17, prompted me to cover it to a certain degree and talk about it. Even though, again, my understanding of it still is, frankly, very limited, because I'm not a psychology student, I'm not a sociology student, I'm not a philosophy student. I know about as much as anybody else when it comes to any of these things and when it comes to a finer detail. However, I try to adopt a philosophical approach of, look, I'm just trying to live and let live. I don't really mind what opinions, values, things you hold, so long as you afford me the opportunity to do it too. Again, bringing it back to the UK BR thing, I think there's space for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, there doesn't have to be a certain way of thinking about something. There doesn't have to be a certain opinion that has to be held. There doesn't have to be anything. It can be a weird and wonderful hodgepodge of opinions, thoughts, aspirations, all sorts, man. And I'd love to see that more and more. And I'd love to see Prem utilize the tournament as a means of being able to achieve that, by promoting the notion that the fans' opinion matters, and attempting at the very least to negate when people dogpile on, because I find it so frustrating when that happens, and it has a tendency to happen online, but in UK battle rap a bit, just because I've seen it happen a few times at this point. It happens, and when it happens, it's one of those things, man. It just has to play out. And it always does. That's the other thing as well. It just kind of rumbles, and then it boils over, and then it's done. Same with almost anything else. But there are certain things that are worth lingering on. There are certain things that are worth discussing in detail and getting to the bottom of and trying to reach a consensus of. But again, I just don't think we afford each other the time and the understanding to do that these days. And the reason I think that it's still possible, it just frustrates me that it's not happening, is when I do my interviews, it's not uncommon for me to talk to my guest after the fact about contentious issues or things that we just can't discuss on camera for sensitivities. And it's rare that even if I disagree with the person, that we can't at least agree to disagree. It's why I find it frustrating that a lot of the discourse in online culture is, it's done with this veil, this sort of this screen right here that you're seeing me on now. It's my shield. You can't get to me, so therefore I can say and do whatever I want. There's something to that, because even though, again, you know who I am, my name's Lorne, you see my face, all the rest of it, there's still, even then, there's still that slight ambiguity that affords me this notion of everything I'm saying right now, it's not real. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. It's online, so it doesn't, but it does. This is about, right now, you're witnessing a moment that really happened somewhere in the world. It has permutations. It has an effect. Even if it's just an annoyance. I'm like, oh, God, what's this guy talking about? The difference, though, is, I'm trying to say this, and whether or not you believe me is a difference. I'm trying to get my point out there. And I'm trying to do it in a way that hopefully you understand and appreciate, even if you don't agree with it. I'm not trying to incite anybody, and I'm not trying to inflame anybody. I'm trying to understand things, people, life, all the rest of this sort of stuff. And the point I wanted to make about all of this is, as much as I get the dopamine hit junkyism of our generation is a real thing, I really do get it. It's this fucking thing, man. It's one of the most amazing inventions we've ever produced, but my God, it's ruining us. It's fucking killing us intellectually and from a values perspective. You know what I mean? From a morality perspective, it's fucking killing us. Because it isn't promoting our inquisitiveness, our curiosity. It's not promoting our intellect. It's allowing us to engage in our baser thoughts, react, and that's it. It doesn't really afford us the opportunity to truly engage with people in the way that I appreciate that I still have the ability to do on YouTube via my interview series. I'd love to host more. Like, the other thing I'd love to do more of, it just doesn't allow me to do this on YouTube really easily. I could do it, like, if there's 3 of you watching now, I'd love to have shows where I have fans on to talk. When I talk about battle rap, I'd love to have a Zoom call where I set it up. I send the link out to everybody, and they hop on if they want to talk about battle rap. So it's not just me talking to you for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is. Same on Twitter. I'd love to host spaces, because I know this sounds crazy, and I mean this. I don't love hearing myself talk. I love listening to people infinitely more than listening to myself talk. It's one of my pure pleasures in life now, is just being present or witnessing a truly good conversation. If I'm part of it, but I'm the listener, even better. However, I just don't get that opportunity all that often. It's a damn shame. It's why I enjoy my interviews so much, because it affords me that opportunity to just sort of sit and listen and ponder and really digest what's being said. I just wish that same disposition was extended to people more readily online. In Cooper's case, I wish more people... Look, I don't mind the first person maybe making a joke. Okay, freedom of expression includes the ability to be an asshole. I'm just saying, though, that because that's a defense. It's like freedom of expression isn't freedom from consequence, and freedom of expression isn't freedom from people expressing their dislike of what you say. I totally get that. I think, though, generally people should be discouraged from being twats. And I'm not sure that our current setup is really set up to do that. I think the current setup is... it's affecting our ability to think rationally when you factor in just... when you say something like, right, is that going to impact a person that's then going to send their followers after me? Like it's some kind of mob mentality. Rather than engaging with the thought, the idea behind it. The other thing as well is this idea of extending a thought. Like the thought a person utters is an extension of their very soul. Like everything that they believe stems from this thought and can be inferred from this thought. You know what I mean? Like again... I'll share with you now, when the reform stuff was kicking in last year and the voting stuff, and I was working for a company doing something. I won't go into any more detail than that, where I was or who I was talking to. But the conversation turned to the political discourse at the time, in the sense of a lot of people were considering voting for reform in the town where I live. And of course I disagree wholeheartedly, because I think Nigel Farage is a fucking toolbox, and I think he's a hypocrite, and I think he's He's a classic, he's a classic example of an individual that uses incitement to further his own goals. He is not someone he doesn't argue in good faith, and there's not a trustworthy bone in his body. I extend that to Trump. Actually, Trump is such a verifiably evil human being, and yet he furthers people's ends, and so he is empowered. But that is just my opinion, and I would happily debate people with regards to that opinion. But that's kind of my point. I would hope to be able to say that, and the other person be able to disagree with me, and to be able to express that disagreement. It goes further though, and it goes, right, can we have that disagreement without you, again, entrenching yourself in this notion that I am already wrong and you are already right? Can we permeate that? Can we progress that discussion more productively than just, I'm going to wait for the opportunity to catch you out or to dunk on you or any of these things? Because again, that dissuades that discourse, that conversation. In this case, when it came to the reform stuff, you start with why. Why do you feel this way? Okay? And then once they've expressed themselves and how they feel, right, can you back up anything that you've said? Can you present me with information? Can you present me with some kind of tangible evidence or proof of what you are saying to back up how you are feeling? Because again, I find a lot of times in discourse, it's how a person feels that informs the way they think. And that's a trick as well, because no offense, emotions pass. Like how you feel about something can change in a day, an hour, a minute. A philosophy is much like science in the sense of it has to cut the mustard on multiple revisits. It can't just be something that works in a single occasion. It has to be something that can stand up to scrutiny. And that's what I tend to, if you want to call it attacking, I suppose, or dealing with or focusing on. That's when I look at arguments. I look at it on its value, I guess. I suppose I would say. Like I try and see the logic in it. I try and see where it's coming from. I try and weigh up whether or not I can verify it for myself, or whether or not my experience informs that opinion. Does it follow any kind of logical consistency if you extend it beyond the argument being presented to the person? And again, is the person arguing in good faith? Again, I think the trouble with that is that's a lot to try and do online. Again, imagine trying to do all of that in one tweet, or without having to series tweet a person, which then looks like you're talking down to them. It becomes very difficult. Again, text conversations are the bane of my existence as well. I hate having a conversation with someone by text or via fucking instant messaging. I'll pick up the voice note or I'll pick up the phone before I do that these days. I'm that guy. If you ever get into conversation with me on my phone, it's usually via voice messaging, because I hate texting. That you lose so much context and you lose so much of a person that you don't get from a text message as opposed to a phone call or a voice note. But nevertheless, I think if we all took the time to extend that courtesy to each other more, I think we'd all be a little bit happier, we'd be less ignorant, and we'd be afforded that understanding that I think we all feel we lack at the moment. I think I feel we don't feel as we feel more isolated than we really are. And I think we all think we're more alone than we really are in how we think and feel about things. There's a lot of experiences in life right now that are inherently common, and yet we are made to think they are not. They are a singular thing. They are unique and exclusive to you, when nothing could be further from the case. And the converse is also true, where there's this notion that everyone's doing this thing and no one's doing that thing. It doesn't exist beyond social media. It's why narratives infuriate me so much, especially when it comes to sports discourse. You'll see this all the time with TalkSport. And it's actually a common tactic. So if you look back at Jon Stewart's tenure when he was criticizing Fox News, one of the tactics that they would utilize as a, quote, news network is they'd have an opinion-based show in the morning called Fox and Friends, where they would ask questions which were very loosely guised as, we're just asking questions, but they were suggestions. They were these things of, this thing is happening and people are concerned about it. That would then evolve into the Fox News program, the mainstay news program, which was still very opinionated because it was presented as such, but it was presented as a factual thing, and became this thing that it's self-validated, right? And the brilliance of that network was that they had this singular notion, this idea that whatever we do has to serve this single purpose, irrespective of whether or not that purpose is right or wrong. People saw the success of that notion and they've copied it since. And that's, again, it worries me because it means that people are immune to criticism and immune to taking responsibility. See, now, those are two things that I actively seek. And that's why, again, I don't necessarily resonate with this generation to a large degree, because criticism is one of the few occasions where I know I can get better. If someone levels criticism at me, it's an opportunity to examine what I do and see if I can apply myself in a different way in order to address that criticism. This page right now is an example of that. Someone said they'd like to see the comment section. You know, it's not necessarily a criticism per se, but it's a critique of what I'm presenting to them, and they'd say it would make it better. Okay, let me see if I can address that. I've attempted to address it. It'll show with time whether or not it's going to pay dividends or not, but I welcome it. It's a good thing to hear from people to say, I think you could do this better, or I think you could do this differently. At the very least, it gives me an opportunity to examine that. It's the same with my worldviews. I don't mind someone criticizing or at least questioning my worldviews. What I do mind is when people are seeking to undermine those two things. They're not attempting to understand me, and they're certainly not attempting to enhance where I'm standing or what I'm thinking. They are looking at me as an enemy. You know what I mean? They look at me like what I'm doing is attempting to undermine or undercut what they're doing, rather than attempt to get to some kind of consensus. Because ultimately, if I disagree with you on something, it's not necessarily to disparage you or to disregard you. I'm trying to sift through what you're saying to try and find common ground so that I then can agree with you. Or at least I can start to see the sense in what you're saying. That takes time, it takes effort, it takes patience, it takes a concerted notion that that's what you're doing. Now, I don't count on everyone having the emotional maturity to do that, nor the intellectual maturity to do that. But I do count on most people. Like, I'm 35. Like, I'm an adult now. I don't get the privilege of saying, well, I'm just a kid or I'm just a young man. No, I've been around long enough now to know that what you say has permutations. The way you say it has permutations. So it's not enough just to say, well, I should be able to say and think what I do what I want. Well, I should, but I should also be cognizant of the fact that that has consequences. But that should be a two-way street, man. It's not up to you to be the bigger man in every single situation. So sooner or later, people have to reckon with what they've built. And I think in this moment, it's difficult for me to see people doing that, because I think people would happily pass the buck, pass that responsibility, duck that responsibility, claim that, well, everyone else is doing it, so why do I have to do it? We are going to come to a point where it's always a thing where it's like, if a problem is only a problem because it's affecting everybody else but you need to have that same fucking opinion when it affects you, because then you're being ideologically consistent. If your notion of a problem isn't a problem because it doesn't affect you, but when it affects you, you fucking suddenly change your tune, it makes it difficult to take your opinion seriously. And I think there should be some more ideological consistency in what we do. We should also be encouraged to think about things more logically and practically as well. I think we think about things to a logical hyper-extension, to the worst case scenario a lot, or to the best case scenario a lot. I think that's why a lot of our capitalistic tendencies are not being curbed, because we're being sold this notion that any one of us could succeed at any one point, despite the fact statistically, no, you can't. But you can make a good life for yourself if you hold everyone to account, and we have enough resources to share with absolutely everybody. But there's this notion that, no, there's people trying to take it from you and steal it from you. Yes, there are. The people telling you that there are people stealing things and taking things because it's an attempt to deflect. But we don't have enough people that scrutinize that are skeptical of that then apply that in a meaningful way at the moment. And part of that, linking back to what I was saying, is dissenting opinion is now not only being disregarded or dunked on, it's being attacked. It's being something that is actively shut out by humor, by trolling, that sort of thing. And I find that discouraging because, as I accurately predicted about the reform stuff, not necessarily the reform stuff, I'm lumping that in, but the riots that occurred in the UK as a result of racial tensions, it wasn't vindicated. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that I saw it coming, because what happens when you rob people of their ability to be able to express themselves peacefully, they'll express themselves violently. And that's for good and bad reasons. You saw the same thing in Ferguson in America when the murders of various African Americans were causing tension with police, because there seemed to be no end to the justification of the police taking lethal force against people who were clearly innocent and posed no physical threat. And the police seemed almost staggered by the fact that there was a violent response, when you told everyone for the longest time they weren't allowed to dissent. You cannot express yourself. You leave people with only so much wiggle room to do something about it before they'll do something about it. And I'm not here to say that's a good or a bad thing, in the sense of, I don't necessarily agree with violence as an alternative to anything, man. That's why I'm here, sitting here, telling you that I want to see people engage with people that they disagree with, but try and come at it from a compassionate standpoint. Try and come at it from this idea that the other person isn't necessarily out to get you. They're just trying to make their way through life, and they've arrived at a different conclusion than you. You're at two different paths on the road, meeting in the middle here for this conversation. You don't necessarily have to skew back off onto your respective paths. There can be a path forward for almost all of us. And the reason I believe that is because when you look at what people do when they cooperate and they collaborate, and they all agree on a consensus and a goal that we all share, look at what fucking amazing things we can do. Look at the things we can achieve. Look at the leaps and bounds we can make as a people. It's not about doing things for the show of it. It's about doing... And again, this is why this book is fascinating me, because these are such simple concepts. They're almost blatantly obvious concepts. But if you don't adhere to them, if you don't hold them, if you don't practice them, they're meaningless and doomed to repeat over and over again. It's why it's frustrating that we don't really have this notion of discourse, healthy or otherwise, at the moment, because there are people that have lived this moment over and over again. Saying that there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah, kinda. Like, it does... Again, the thoughts you're having, the ideas you're having, it is a good to fair chance that not only has someone else thought and felt exactly how you thought and felt throughout phases of your life, in moments of your life, multitudes of people have. And yet, at the moment, the way social media and the way that everything is designed in terms of our interpersonal discourse is designed is to make you feel so isolated and so insignificant, while at the same time promoting your individualism to an insane degree, to disregard the fact that we're all fucking human and we're all just trying to make our way through life. And the only thing that's certain about all of our existences is one day we're going to close our eyes and we ain't going to open them again. A fact that keeps waking me up at night. The fact that one day I am not going to be of this world anymore. And I got to make peace with that fact that that day's coming sooner and sooner and sooner. And it's just about being happy between that day and then, man. That's the... If I can leave you with one notion about the whole discourse thing, is to try and always bring it all back down to the fact that, look, we're all just trying to live a happy and secure existence. That's it. There are people, there are evil people in this world. There are people who would seek to undermine and play people off against each other. We have to be smarter than that. We have to... When a salesman is coming up to you trying to sell you something that you inherently walked in and did not want, it's up to us to be strong enough to say, "What? Didn't ask your opinion. I'll let you know if I need anything." When people are telling you how to think, this is the real reason, here are the facts. Stop looking at it as, oh, good, someone did the legwork for me. We need to have more energy for discourse. We need to afford ourselves more time and the ability to be able to think things clearly and logically, but do it in an open way that we are still willing to hear what other people have to say. because we are cognizant of the fact that we do not know everything, and it's not impossible for our openness to inspire that in other people. There's a video series that I love. I rewatch it constantly. It's Counter Arguments, and they cover the movie 12 Angry Men. I talked about this the other day on social media. If you've never seen 12 Angry Men, I think it's from 1956 or 1957, starring, I think it's Henry Fonda. It is one of the most magnificent pieces of cinema because it is literally a discourse in real life, what you're seeing now. There are so many elements of that movie from 70 years ago that are perfectly applicable to current day discourse, even on social media. The types of characterizations of the 12 different jurors, the notion of needing to react immediately versus taking time to consider the fucking facts of a situation and interpret them rather than just taking them at face value. The notion of bigotry and racism in discourse and the way that prejudice rears its head and the assumptions we make based on the lives that we've led, ignorant of other people's experiences and their worldviews and what they have to offer and what they might know that we don't. All of these things come together in that movie, and I love watching it. But Counter Arguments goes one step further, and they explain the discourse. And they're only about 10 minutes a pop. If you get an hour tomorrow, I would heartily recommend that you chuck it on. It's Counter Arguments on YouTube. It's the 12 Angry Men. It's black and white series. Go and watch it and be enlightened. I watch that series all the time to remind me about how I need to be when it comes to talking to people that have a differing opinion than me. It's brilliant. As far as the question Charlie, welcome by the way. Charlie's asked me, excuse me. Do I think there'd be more riots? I don't know. At the moment, the reason I predicted that there would be some kind of violent altercation, especially in young men, is because I felt that. Speaking from personal experience, the number of times that I have been put in a position where I felt that physical altercation being my only outlet to be able to exert myself in a situation was getting worse and worse. It was happening more and more frequently, where I felt like I might have to physically exert myself in this situation because the other person is being so pig-headed and unreasonable that we've just got to go fucking Cambodian on this and just remind people that sometimes it's smarter not to argue with someone that could beat you into the ground. Now, the reason I feel bad about that is because, again, once a fist is raised in anger, there's now no longer discourse. Even if the conversation continues afterwards, you're speaking to someone from a perspective of intimidation. Do you really trust someone to be honest about how they feel if they're intimidated by you? I wouldn't. If you think I'm intimidated by you, would you trust a single word that I say? Or am I just saying it to get you off my back? Am I just saying it so that you won't hurt me anymore? It's why the culture of fear and intimidation in American discourse, especially in the political side of things at the moment, is so concerning to me. Because what happens is each individual person tries to protect their own interests, sacrificing the morals and the values that we are all supposed to hold in order to keep that sort of thing at bay. And the more people do that, the worse it gets. And again, it's a weird one, right? I was watching the Dark Knight Rises and the Dark Knight today and yesterday. I had a rough week, and one of the things I do when I have rough weeks is I go back and I watch things from, that I love, and I love the Dark Knight movies. They're fucking brilliant. But one of the things that you watch is the social paradigms, the social dynamics of people when things go wrong, and these things that we put in place to protect ourselves from some of the worst elements of the human condition fail us. Well, Charlie, what I would say is democracy is only an incarnation of how we should govern ourselves. If you read, again, this book of philosophy, there was, I think, it was either Aristotle or it was one of his, maybe it was Socrates. It was one of the two. It might have been Aristotle. But the idea in ancient Greece was that they had a ruling class, but the idea was that they were highly educated, but they were also taught a moral compass. The idea was, we have a class of people that are designed to govern. They are going to be put in the best possible position to govern because they are the wisest and because they are most disenfranchised from doing a bad job. The question I've often wrestled with in terms of modern democracy is how you disincentivize politicians from the monetary gains that they exploit from their positions. Because while you have, and in America this is particularly prevalent because capitalism has afforded corporations and mega conglomerates and hyper wealthy individuals to be able to negatively and overwhelmingly influence political discourse because they have lobbyists who are able to present things to people that we, mere mortals can't because we don't have the financial influence to do so. This is also coupled with the fact that a lot of politicians these days are inherently ignorant people. We're not talking about intelligent people now. We're not even talking particularly morally stable people. We're talking about people that have treated this as a business and as a career. These are not people of moral standing. These are not people that seek to better life generally so that we can all benefit. They are looking at it as a career opportunity. One of the modern failings of modern democracy is that we as people have been shit at choosing our politicians, and we have largely disinvested ourselves from that choice and the repercussions of that choice, because ultimately the people who are responsible for a lot of political discourse being the way it is now is us. We give these people platforms, we give them time, we don't scrutinize them, we don't hold them to account, we don't ask them to justify themselves, we certainly don't penalize them in any meaningful way, because otherwise scandals would not still continue happening. Exploding completely unproductive ways. Yeah, and that's kind of the lesson of that one, is that so that's what struck me about that ending segment of the Dark Knight Rises, when Bane has effectively liberated in his mind Gotham. The idea was that the rich are responsible for a lot of the ills of society, and the people rising up were going to take it back. But the allegory of that extends, because it's the same person who's telling them that this is their freedom is the one lying to them to keep them enslaved. And that's kind of the point, is that I see modern discourse, because of the way it's evolved, and again, I use the battle rap thing as a microcosm of it. It's not about getting to the right answer. It's about picking a side and dunking on the other side and continuing to do so, because unfortunately there will always be at least two sides to a situation. You can't even get, if you post a picture of a puppy on Twitter these days, half the people love it, half the people tell the puppy to go fuck itself. There's not an encouragement to reach a consensus. And any attempt to undermine that is what I think is ostracized. If you look back at Cooper, again, I'm using him as the example, was he saying he wasn't prepared to hear the other side of the story? Was he not prepared to discuss his ideas more? No. He was saying, I'm getting frustrated with people not listening to me, because people were attempting to ostracize an opinion that they didn't fully understand and didn't want to engage with for a variety of reasons, and felt it was more productive and easier and more beneficial to them personally to spend their time dunking on him. And Charlie's right. Yeah, the sensationalism of things is something that I worry about too. That's to do with, again, the hyperbolic nature of the time we live in. Everything is the biggest thing it's ever been, the most important thing that's ever been, blah, 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 blah. And until we get away from that notion and try to treat things with a degree of skepticism and maybe just yearn for a quieter time, because I think, again, it's on us with, I can't say I include myself in this, because honestly, like, every fantasy I've ever had about winning £1 million or an obscene amount of money literally boils down to, I'd sort out my mum's house, my sister's house, my kid's house, my dad's house. The rest of the money goes in the bank, and I never fucking touch the principal ever again, and I live off the interest. Even if that interest is only enough to continue my current lifestyle, it just means I don't have to work anymore. It's never, I need absolutely everything under the sun. But I don't think I'm typical of most people. I think most people these days have got it in their heads that it's always bigger, always better. I need more, 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 more. The other person has more, I want more. This person has more, I want that. In a way, the culture of billionaires and excess inspires people to aspire to something that doesn't exist, because the number of social media personalities and presentations that ultimately end up being fucking frauds is nothing short of an epidemic. And yet, we've bought that as a notion that it's something that can be achieved. It's something I kind of bought into when I became a YouTuber. I thought I could be, I could get to 1,000 subs and then on to 10,000, 100,000 if I was only good enough. The truth is that there are only room for a few exceptional people in the world. But even then, that level of exceptionalism doesn't have to extend to literal lifetimes worth of exceptionalism. I did the calculation when it comes to Elon Musk's net worth earlier on. If you save £10,000 or dollars a day for 80,000 years, you'd still have less than he has. So just think about that. 10 grand to me tomorrow would be something. I could change my life with 10 grand tomorrow. That's how modestly I live. £10,000 a day for 80,000 years and you still don't have as much as he has. Yeah. There's a lot of problems. Again, I'm touching on a lot of things and I'm probably getting away from my wider point. But my point was more using Kupar as the microcosm here to just say, look, the next time you see a dissenting opinion that you disagree with, think about what you're actually trying to... If you're honestly just trying to troll people, look, I can't stop people. You can't legislate for people being twats. It's a famous saying. People are allowed to be assholes. But here's the thing. Should you want to be an asshole? If you're sort of person that laughs about, oh, this is going to be funny because it gets a rise out of him. Are you fucking 13? Shouldn't you be above that? Because again, the argument for me in this situation is, what happens when it's you? Again, my way in my mind is treat everyone with courtesy, respect, understanding, patience, time, and attempt to reach a consensus, right? That means that applies to everybody. Let's flip it. You want to troll everybody because you think it's funny. Right, well, what happens when everyone becomes a troll and there's a troll worse than you? Which there will be sooner or later. Is that really the world you want to live in? Because if you do, you get what's coming to you, which is kind of what we're seeing now, which is more and more people having remorse after the fact. And I'm sorry, part of the healing process of this process, if we are going to have one, is the reconciliation and the understanding of your responsibility in that discourse. I have to hold my hands up sometimes and say I was too vigorous, I was too cocksure when it came to my opinion, I was too aggressive, whatever it is. But I will always try and wrestle and reconcile with that because I feel like that's just my responsibility as a man. I'll share with you, I had some really bad news the other day. And a friend of mine reached out to me. He wasn't particularly happy with me because of the way I'd spoken to him. Unbeknownst to him, I'd been quite heavily drinking because of the news. Wasn't my proudest moment, but I didn't really know what to do in the moment. God bless him, he then ended up on the phone with me for a good half an hour, just talking it through, just trying to get through to me, just trying to make the point. Now, even though I don't think I was particularly, on the scale of things going wrong in the world right now, getting drunk and getting mad at someone is not particularly on that list. It was still incumbent upon me to call him the next day. Sorry, message him because I was too embarrassed to call him. To message him the next day and say, look, that wasn't fair on you that you had to deal with me in that state. I apologize and I hope I can do better. And mean it. It's not enough just to do it again the next week. Graciously, he accepted my apology, but it is something that I'm cognizant of now that, I might have to disable my phone. If I know I'm drinking, it's like, right, the phone's got to go somewhere else. I need to take that responsibility going forward. It's about doing that. And all I'm asking for really, ultimately, is people to just take a second, look at the other person, and just afford them some consideration. Just a moment, even if there's someone you fucking despise. There's a great video at one point. It was in a John Oliver piece where they were discussing the Civil War and the Confederate flag, and there were two guys having a discussion. And one of the gentlemen was clearly trying to argue the case for the Confederate flag because they felt it was part of their heritage. Okay, that's a different discussion for another day. But the African-American gentleman on the opposite side, trying to get the conversation to move forwards, I loved because he was making a concerted attempt to listen to what the person was saying in order to address the arguments directly. I.e., why do you think that flag is important? well, my family died to protect their farm, da 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 da. And the most cutting of responses, I don't think I've ever heard an argument incisively dealt with quite as well as this. Who was working that farm? And that is a blunt, direct, but very good question. But that's when you realise that the discourse can only run it so far, because both people in that conversation were not willing to be reasonable, because the ultimate gentleman's response, don't forget this, because it's one of those ones where you go, that guy is still walking around right now, is, do you have any idea, no, my family was working the farm, do you have any idea how expensive slaves were back then? Like, had no consideration for what he was actually saying in the context of what he was saying. And again, I'm extending that courtesy to him in this moment to say, maybe going forward, if your argument is that something is being misinterpreted, taken out of context, right, try not to say something that validates the argument of the other person in the interim period out of anger, because that's something you may regret going forward. If I get a chance, I'll forward the link to that one, because again, the thing, that argument in particular is a good one for me, because it's the emotion of that particular debate that gets me, because it's a country trying to reconcile with a horrendous chapter in its history. And right now in the UK, there's a lot of hidden xenophobia and racism that's now becoming overt, and I find it very disconcerting, because it's now starting to come out in just sort of what is considered to be quite reasonable humor. I'm seeing an awful lot of racist stuff on Instagram, for instance. An awful lot of racist stuff on Facebook when it comes to just the jokes. Like, it's the stereotyping. Oh, but it's only a bit of fun. It's like, no, this is racist. This is. We all kind of agreed this was a bad idea a few years ago, right? That generally, again, we're all trying to accept each other. No. We think this is funny. Like, right, but again, if it was you, how would you feel? We don't ask ourselves that question enough, I feel like. Again, I taught my daughter this actually not too long ago. The idea of bullying is, if you're making a joke and you don't think the other person's going to laugh, it's not a joke. You're bullying the person. So just consider that before you say what you're saying. Hopefully she'll be a wiser person than me, and she'll be a lot less triggered, because I am. That's my biggest failing. I'm just as reluctant to hold fire on a conversation as most people in this generation. So, I can't go in too hard on that. Another golden rule of the internet that's forgotten is don't feed the trolls. Well, it's worse than that, mate. So Charlie's made a point here about don't feed the trolls. When it's not necessary, because the problem is it's the way social media is built for engagement, and they think that it's easier to incite a negative emotional response than it is a positive one, and they're right. But that's a response. Again, that's on us as people to reconcile that and to limit that. Dude, it's why I'm not on Twitter except for to follow Battle Rap these days. I don't really make a habit of scrolling through Twitter unless it's like, right, what's going on in Battle Rap, because that's what I'm here for. Cool. Instagram, I'm trying to limit that as well now, because again, that's starting to get to me, but I'm on it because occasionally I'll find stuff from my daughter, I'll find some stuff from my mates or my sister, just to fire that, just as, it's silly, right? But in terms of getting my information and in terms of getting a general gist of the world, I know that it has a negative impact on me. And that's my responsibility. That's me having to mitigate, having to police it, having to go, right, no, I need to bring that back. To bring it back to the topic of conversation at the top, the reason why that skeptical point of view is so important is because I don't necessarily believe the conversation about the online protection thing has to start and end on whether or not it's enforced. I think the conversation needs to be, can it achieve the same goal that it pertains to without the negative impact of things? Can we propose something different? Is there something that could be done differently? It's not, because it's not sometimes, and this is the hard thing that I think we forget in this era, is that the two perspectives we're presented sometimes, both of them can be wrong. Sometimes there is a consensus or a middle ground that's just not being considered because both consider that concession too much. And it's like, again, everybody, we have to find a way to coincide and exist with each other. We have to. Because the alternative is escalation. And that escalation only ends one way with human beings, and that's conflict. And I don't want to see a world where that's the norm. I don't need to feel like I need to threaten people to get my way. I don't want to feel like I have to get mad to express myself when it's heard or engaged with. If only because I won't always have my physical benefits of being a younger man. I'll be an older man one day. I might be an unhealthy man one day. I might have a crippling disease one day. I might lose an arm. All of these things that then don't invalidate my opinion, but would in the eyes of someone that would look to physically exert me in an age where they feel that that's their only way of being able to get their point across without being yelled down. Again, I put myself in Kupar's position because I've been in Kupar's position where I go, fucking hell, lads, would everyone just calm the fuck down and listen to what I'm actually saying rather than saying, the thing you're saying. And you go, if that's what I was actually saying, I'd have fucking said it. But you're not listening to what I'm saying. You're just using what you want to hear to further your own argument. And that's not what we're doing here. Not feeding the trolls is one thing. That's why I think just choosing which discourse you engage with is helpful. But the trick is, sooner or later, you will get roped into negative discourse. And I just like to see less of it. Anyways, I've been going for another hour and a half, so I'm sorry to waffle on. Charlie, appreciate your comments, by the way, bud. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say the internet has always had a crude, racist sense of humour. I'd say there's always been an element of that in people. Racism is effectively just a very extreme method some people have of trying to understand and interpret the world. It's an inherently flawed one. In fact, it's in 12 Angry Men, where one of the characters, I forget which juror he is, I think it's juror number 10, I think. So it's juror number 8, juror number 9. Because juror... Sorry, let me get this right. I think juror number 8's the protagonist. And juror number 9 is immediately to his left, and then the guy immediately to his left is a racist bigot type character. And there's two moments in the movie where that bigotry is ultimately heralded as being inherently disadvantageous to the person's position because it undermines their position both times. One of the times is he says you can't take this boy's opinion as fact. His testimony as fact because he's a slum kid. We hate slum kids and all the rest of it. Then holds up the testimony of a neighbor who claims to have seen the murder, and the protagonist actually points out, he goes, "Why do you believe hers and not his? She's one of them too." You think you're pretty smart, huh? And it's like, well, no, but I'm questioning your logical stance because you're saying his opinion cannot be taken as fact because of your racist views, but you are omitting those racist views when it comes to this person whose narrative suits you. So which is it? There has to be a logical consistency here. Later on in the movie, he goes off on a tirade. And even in that tirade, he makes reference to the thing that I think most racists lean on in terms of trying to justify their position, which is, look, I know some of them that are all right. And you go, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, I can confidently tell you that my annoyance with people is down to them as a person. It's incredibly rare for me to go, oh, they all do this. Now, of course, there are cultural norms that I can reasonably infer because luckily for me, I've been exposed to a number of different cultures on a sustained basis. But that's including and not limited to just businesses. Like, certain people within certain industries, they behave a certain way, so you can go, oh, that's the industry they're in. I can tell because that's a certain thing people have in the industry. I think one thing, for instance, in call centers, you can make reasonable predictions about how a person is based on if they've worked in a call center or not, because most people adopt certain mannerisms, colloquialisms, habits because they work in call centers. It's just a survival instinct. It's just something that they lean on in order to get through their work. It's just as dumb because tarring everyone with the same brush is just an inherently stupid thing to do. You can make assumptions, I suppose, but inherently leaping to judgments based on a preconception you have about a person is almost unilaterally one of the dumbest things you can do. And it undermines you when you do that. And I think, again, one of my frustrations is I think I got lumped in like that during one of my discourse periods. It's like, oh, he's just a hater. I go, well, okay. If what I'm saying has no merit, fair enough. I'm clearly just spouting off at the mouth. But I'd like to think what I'm saying is based in something I've either observed or I can present. That's why it was so frustrating to see that discourse evolve the way it did, especially with my attempts to try and engage with it being seen as you're instigating. It's like, no, I've got multiple people trying to have a conversation with me all at once and I'm just trying to keep pace with it. If it was happening in real life, it would have been so much clearer what was happening, which was you had multiple people all yelling at me at once and I'm trying to deal with all of them at the same time. No one can do that. That's why online discourse is so frustrating for a lot of people, because if anyone ever does jump on something you say, it feels like it's 1,000 people all yelling at you at once, and no one can have a productive conversation under those circumstances. No one. It's not possible. And to bring it back to the point, I'm just urging people, number one, to remember that discourse, when it's healthy and when it's consensually good-spirited and in good faith, it's almost always a good thing. It's never a waste of time hearing another perspective or another point of view, even one that you disagree with, so long as you recognize that the other person is going to be receptive to yours. In the sense of this moderation technique that the government seem to be trying to instigate, again, I'm not seeking to undermine the entire philosophy of it. I am attempting to deal with the nub of the issue in the sense of, is it achieving the goal it's setting out to do, or is it a smokescreen for something else? But I'd want to scrutinize it based on its own merits rather than what I see people do, which is, oh, the government, they always do this. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it would be better to scrutinize each individual case, each individual thing, rather than get into the habit and being lazy of just assuming something because something previously happened. It can inform your opinion, but it shouldn't solidify it. And finally, when it pertains to censorship and this notion of you cannot say that for this reason, again, maybe I'm in the minority on this. I am not really of the opinion that there are people who shouldn't be given a platform so long as they recognize that people have the right to address them. And they don't have the right to monopolize conversations, and they don't have the right to utilize mob mentality in order to shout down dissenting opinion. I think that's why ultimately I would promote intellectualism and discourse, because I think it makes everyone smarter and it gives everyone the opportunity to make up their own minds rather than looking there and go, what do you think? What do you think? Well, I'll just agree with you two so we can go along. I would much rather have a million different delineations of an opinion that ultimately reach a consensus, albeit a broad one, than two tribes warring that never get anything done. And I feel like that's where we've arrived at. We've arrived at a point in a lot of different aspects of our discourse where we just circle the drain constantly. Nothing ever gets settled. Everything just kind of goes in the same perpetual motion machine as everything else. And you see another incarnation of the same argument, the same conversation happening over and over again, the same arguments, the same viewpoints being trotted out over and over again. And it's just frustrating because this is coming from a personal philosophy now. Never encountered anything in my life that with concerted effort and a thought put into what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, there's nothing that can't be overcome. Nothing. With enough effort and with the right thought and a good faith argument in what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, there's nothing that can't be done. Imagine if everyone, and again, I know that the argument of, well, if everyone would just, ultimately is a flawed argument because no one ever is going to do it. But it is that thing of just saying, look, extending it to a ridiculous proportion. Imagine if everyone just agreed, for instance, that our political structure is inherently flawed because the status quo does not serve the purposes of the people and therefore the reason it exists, to govern us, to lead us, to show us the best way to live and provide us with opportunities with which to chase that, rather than what modern society as a whole has evolved into, which is just fucking, We're a feeding tube for the rich, basically. You know, I've got no love for people that are wealthy. If only because, again, it's insatiable. I'm a big fan of knowing when's enough. You know, I'm a big fan of knowing my limits and going, right, I've had enough now. That, I'd like more, but I've had enough. You know what I mean? We live in a generation of people that would never recognize when is enough. And that goes up and down the board, by the way. That's not a young person thing or an old person thing. There is inherently too many people that do not recognize that enough is sometimes enough. It's a good thing that you've got enough. Not quite as much as you might have wanted, but more than you would have expected. Like, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. I'll deal with Charlie's last comment and then I think I'll wrap. Unless there's 6 people watching right now, so if anyone has any thoughts or if you just want to chuck your 2 cents in, then please by all means, and I'll try and get to it. If there was substantive change to the political, economical, and social systems during COVID, do you think we'd be here right now? I think there was. I think COVID changed people in a variety of different ways. I think one of the other aspects of our culture at the moment is this idea that quality is not something that's necessarily needed in order to maintain what people think they need. What I mean by that is if you look at just almost every aspect of the life in the UK right now, it's worse than it was 5 or 6 years ago. Despite leaps and bounds in technology, things are worse. Our infrastructure is worse. Almost all of our public services are worse. Almost every business that we deal with offers a worse service for just as much, if not more money. I don't really feel in my life like I'm better off or I've been getting steadily worse, despite the fact that I've been encouraged to live a more and more modest lifestyle, yet aspiring to earn more and more. There's not an entrepreneurial spirit promoted. It's very much a spirit of you should just be glad to have what you have. Meanwhile, the same people telling us to be grateful of having what we have will never have enough, because there's no amount of money, wealth, trappings that will ever satiate whatever the fuck it is that they need in the first place. It's why I can't, honestly, man, like, I posed this question to people at work a while back, which is if I gave you a check and asked you to write any number on it, but that number had to last you the rest of your life, what would that number be? And some of the numbers, man, it was billions of pounds. One guy wrote, I think it was something like 300 billion pounds or something like that. And I'm like, can I ask you a question? What's the greatest salary you could ever achieve? Like, in your mind, like, if someone offered you this salary tomorrow, what would be an amazing salary? I think he said 150 grand. I'm like, right, let's retroactively apply that to when you were 16. And apply that now to when you retire at, say, 60, because you're on 150 fucking grand. You can retire at 60 years old. What's that number? I think it was something like 15 million, 18 million pounds, which, by the way, still a fuck ton of money. But that's in his mind. That's not me. That in his mind, a hypothetical best case scenario for his career, and the disparity between what he thought he needed in terms of to be able to enjoy life versus what he would actually need in a best case scenario in the situation of his life right now is a question of a percentage. And that's the disparity between the perception right now, is we think we need a lot more to be happier than we really do. But I think we actually have a lot less than we need to be happy too. And it's that, again, the extremes of everything at the moment is distorting how we see everything at the moment, because you've got uber wealthy people on this side and uber poor people on this side. The notion of a middle is skewed one way or the other, because you've got hyper opinionated people on the left and hyper opinionated people on the right. There's inherently no room for a moderate conservative or a moderate liberal person who has conservative views, and vice versa. Everything has to be taken to the extreme in order to get over the noise of everything. And I'm just saying, like, there's nothing wrong with dialing everything all the way back down. It's slow it down. The pace of things, the volume of things. If it's so fast you don't have time to think and can only react, I would argue things are moving too fast. if things are so loud that the only voices you hear are the loudest of those fucking voices, I would argue those are the least well informed, because they are spending all of their time yelling and none of their time thinking. And like I'm saying, man, there's nothing wrong with social media necessarily being an outlet for our baser instincts and our need to be able to have a laugh and joke and all the rest of that sort of stuff. And to Charlie's point, I'm not adverse to social media being there on the days where people don't really feel like engaging with the world and using it as escapism. What I'm saying is, though, that considering a lot of our discourse is conducted on it, and considering that our reliance on it now in terms of governing how we think and how we feel about things is getting severe, and it's endorsing things that I don't think we should be really endorsing, I'm just asking people now on an individual basis to own that responsibility of having your own mind and reserving judgment. Instead of retweeting and reposting the thing as soon as you see it and giving a quick, maybe check it. Check to make sure that it's been corroborated. Make sure the thing you're reacting to is actually what you're reacting to. And the bigger question is saying, do you actually care enough about it? Is it really that important to get invested in it in this moment? Or is it just worth banking it for now? I see 1,000 things every day these days and I just let it go. Or it just goes into the old synopsis. I don't care to dunk on every single thing I see. It's just not worth it, man. Especially considering that at the moment, I really wish I could reserve my time and the freedom I have currently on the internet to be able to do things that I think are actually important while it's a thing. I think a day is coming, and it's probably sooner rather than later, where YouTube will not afford channels like mine a place because I don't make YouTube any money. Social media will be a thing that's moderated beyond control because you'll need to pay for it, and even then paying for it won't be enough. You will need to register in order to use social media under the pretense of governance. AIs, and we haven't even touched on AI, that the amount of fucking garbage that's being generated by that people just fucking buy. Like, again, that's the only thing I would say on this broadcast is, please don't share things if they look sensational. If they look sensational now, please. If you must engage with it, I suppose, fine, in the sense of leaving a heart or something like that. But the worst thing you can do is spread stuff, because once it takes a life on its own, it's almost impossible to get that genie back in the bottle, even if it's later disproved. And with AI running rampant, generating things left, right, and centre that people can't verify for themselves because they can't tell the difference, it's a real dangerous time in terms of discourse, because that stuff then forms opinions, that then informs facts or how people feel about things, and it becomes a fucking cesspit. You know what I mean? And we have a tough enough time understanding each other when we're talking to each other directly, let alone trying to interpret each other's opinions and fucking motives through the things we share or the things we make using a technology we still don't fully understand. So anyways, I'm waffling now, and I've been waffling for nearly an hour and a half. I guess what I wanted to say is I wanted to say to the people who were dunking on Cooper earlier, again, in battle rap, I hope, if you must get this out of your system now, know that new fans are not going to appreciate and take to this culture that currently exists within UK battle rap, which is, oh, someone thinks differently than us, get him. If you're trying to attract new fans, not a smart move. At least not until you've ingratiated yourself with them. But to the general point being raised by him, and again, linked in with the stuff that I've seen in America over the last week or so, as it pertains to the ability to be able to say what you think, but back it up, not just make up bullshit and then say it like it is what you think. Because again, that's the biggest problem, is you have someone in power that habitually lies, but is excused because those lies serve a wider purpose in making people feel a certain way, despite the fact that it's to their detriment. So yeah, I want to end it there, because if I get into Trump, we're going to be here for a while, because I have a very long and torrid history examining his career and his dispositions towards people. He's one of the few truly evil people of the world currently walking, but I ain't going to debate that with you now. It's a bit late in the day. Anyways, Charlie, I appreciate your interactions, my friend. It's been good to see you. To the people that joined me throughout the broadcast, I want you to know I didn't anticipate people really paying attention to this live, so I'm sorry if you found this sort of droning and stuff. Again, I do these from time to time where I'm trying to just trying to talk it out in real time and try to explore my thoughts in hopefully approaching it a cognizant way. So forgive me if it was long and windy. My conversations can get that way sometimes. It's why I require a partner and someone to sort of bounce off of a little bit, you know what I mean? Pause. There you go. See? End on a joke. See, I have a sense of humor. I really do. Anyways, right. I shall... I appreciate that, Charlie. If I really had a wider point to make or anything to back up what I'm saying, right? Because I will admit, by the way, that was just an hour and a half of me opining about something. I'd be happy to hear the alternative opinions to anything that I've said. If at any point anyone watching this, you don't want to do an interview, but let's say for the sake of argument, you would be happy to appear to have a discussion or a debate. I'm always happy to do that. Even if you just want to talk to me privately, man, I'm always happy to have the discussion privately because, again, I feel like that's more of a conversation rather than an argument. But I appreciate the reason I'm coming back to this. I appreciate your company this evening, the 4 of you that are currently watching, and I think up to 6 people watching at various points. So I appreciate you joining me for this. It's not one of those ones that I intend to do a lot. I felt the need though to talk because, again, the Colbert thing was incredibly concerning to me. The South Park thing, because that still might have ramifications that will be interesting to watch. But both of them hearken to something that will invariably impact us with time, which is this notion that reality is up for debate. And how we feel is really the true barometer of what we should do about things, rather than, well, how's about we all just stop and think for a second, employ a bit of logic, a bit of understanding, considering we're all in the same fucking boat of life, and try and agree a general consensus forward, rather than let's draw battle lines and see who's not dead at the end of it. I'm not seeking to destroy my enemies, guys. They don't really exist. We're all just humans trying to make our way in life. And the sooner we all kind of get pulling in the same direction, the sooner we can get further along down the road. Not only for us, but for future generations, you know what I mean? I'd like to leave my child more than the future that I see at the moment, which is I see a reaction to what is being described as wokeism now. Where, again, if you take America, for example, I'm very worried for the rights of women in particular, the rights of minorities, because I think that you're seeing such a counter reaction to the progress that was made in recent times in terms of just affording everybody the right to be an individual and everybody the right to pursue their happiness irrespective of who and what they are, to be who and what they want to be. And instead now I think you're seeing a reinforcement of norms that maybe were fucking prevalent in the 50s and accepted, but to this day I would think we've evolved slightly past. Time will prove me right, or time will hopefully, fingers crossed, prove me wrong, and we're maybe a little more enlightened in the UK than to start dictating the biological rights of women to women. Because yeah, when you're seeing tweets from American politicians saying "your body, my choice," male politicians, I might add, they're entering a fucking intellectual dark age. And it is genuinely concerning. Again, and the dumb thing is, a lot of this stuff probably doesn't affect me in a direct way. Because again, I can insulate myself. I'm lucky enough that I'd be able to insulate myself from a lot of the ramifications of the political decisions made. I still care though, because it's not just about how it affects me now. It's about how it might affect me and people I care about in the future. And again, that's how I would invite you to think about a lot of discourse. It's not just about you. It's about how it affects the people around you and how the people you care about. You know what I mean? It's try and think less individualistically when it comes to the ramifications of the political ideology you adopt. But, don't be afraid to be an individual when it comes to the discourse and your individual scrutiny, your individual application of philosophy, logic, values, things of that nature. Don't necessarily feel you have to adopt the political position of people you agree with in everything because you're part of the tribe. Again, ditch the fucking tribes, man. We're all part of the same tribe, man. We're all humans just trying to make our way. So, anyways, I'm gonna quit rambling. I'm gonna finish my dreadful, fucking awful cup of coffee. This is terrible. It's not even cold now because the ice has melted. And I'll say, I don't know what I would talk about, Charlie, to be honest with you. I'm going to cover my hair because I made a fucking terrible job of cutting it, and I've got to let it grow out now. I don't know what I would talk about beyond what I've talked about today, to be honest with you, Charlie. Like I say, I had an amalgamation of different things that I wanted to just get off my chest because of what someone was going through today that I wanted to talk about. And again, I wanted to interject some personal experiences from stuff that relates to what I do now on a more regular basis, which is the battle rap stuff. Because again, I find, what I'm saying there applies, because I think it's interesting that, again, I know Cammy has a pretty big presence in the scene, but I'm just not aware of anyone that covers battle rap on a regular basis apart from me, him, and a few others, and yet, interestingly enough, I'm the only one that's omitted. The reason I'm bringing that up is because, again, there's nothing wrong with them saying we think he's wrong because of this, this, and this. What frustrates me is that I don't think it's that. I think it's, we just don't like him. Okay, that's fine. But what about the points I'm raising? Or what about the points I raised in the past? What about the fact that I'm also positive? You know, it's not just I'm relentlessly critical. It's I'm just trying to reach a consensus. I'm trying to get to the truth, or I'm trying to get to an aspect that I agree with. That involves disagreement, unfortunately. And that's the other thing I would just say very, very quickly. Disagreement is part of discourse, man. You're not supposed to agree on everything. But you're supposed to kind of edge closer and closer to an agreement as you chip away at each other's fallacies and the ideological or logical fallacies within, rather than just glomping onto one aspect of it and saying, everything that you've just said is bollocks because of this one thing. You go, well, it's not... It's the weight of things. Again, think of it like a trial or a legal proceeding in the sense of you weight it to the balance of probability and you'll get closer to what I think discourse should be. But as far as making this into a multi-part series, Charlie, I doubt very much that I'll do that because, I don't really have a lot of these more passionate needs to speak on things of a wider context all that often. I don't know what purpose it serves either, other than I just wanted to get out of my head for a bit. I've been thinking about this for a week, and I just wanted to sort of voice my concerns, voice my thoughts, voice what I think could be done, as impotent as that might end up being, because, of course, again, I don't articulate my thoughts very concisely. I don't articulate them with any conviction that I think is heard and interpreted, especially within the spirit with which I would want it to be taken. So I'm not a particularly good communicator when it comes to these things. I do this more for my benefit than anyone else's, but I hope that someone derives some benefit from it. Anyways, right. If I think of something to make into a series, Charlie, here's my concession. If I can think of something to make it into a series, I'll let you know. For now, though, I don't anticipate this being anything more than just a one-off because I wanted to talk about it. So for the 5 people currently watching, thank you for joining me, Charlie. Appreciate your comments. Appreciate it. It's always good to see you, by the way. It's been a minute. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate if you've joined me over the streams that I've done over the last week or so. I hope you're looking forward to my conversation with David Williams on Monday. Some of this might form the basis of that conversation, to be honest. He's a very vocal advocate for disabled rights and the disadvantaged, so that will probably come up. In the meantime, though, just hope you're keeping okay. I know a lot of this conversation has seemed quite doom and gloomish, but that's only because I think we're edging closer and closer to a point of no return with this stuff for the time being, and I would quite like to at least throw my 2 cents in to say, look, I think just cooler heads prevail. A bit of consideration, a bit of forethought, a bit of understanding, mutual or otherwise. That would be good. I think it's mutually beneficial. It's not expensive. It's not hard. Bit of healthy skepticism from time to time without being overly skeptical or purposefully skeptical. These are all good things. They're all just handy practices to go with, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's good to see you too, Charlie. And yeah, as far as Hadashroom's drinking and texting, yeah, it's a weird one. It's just, again, that person caught me at a bad moment, and I just let them have it. And yeah, what can you do? Again, we're all human, man. We all make mistakes. Again, it's about learning and growing, man. That's what it is. Again, no one's gonna hit 1,000. And fucking hell, man, you might need to learn the same lesson 4 or 5 times in certain cases. It's not uncommon for people to have to make several run-ups at the same thing. We're not perfect. And just because you try doesn't mean you're entitled to succeed. Failure is almost always an option. So, yeah. Anyways, it's lovely to see you all. I enjoyed your company this evening. I hope that I didn't bore you to tears, or if you've used me as ASMR to get you to sleep well, sweet dreams, all that good jazz. Like I said, I'll be back on Monday with an interview with David Williams. That will be airing on Tuesday, I would imagine. I'm also planning on doing additional streams, reactions to other battles. The other thing I would say, Charlie, is if you want to leave it in the comments, because I'm going to wrap in a second. Any suggestion, if you like this sort of stuff, if you like sort of more general conversation, more general discussion topics and things of that nature, leave them in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Or in there's a community tab on YouTube now, so if you want to leave a community post, you can do that. So if you have suggestions or ideas or things you'd like to see, dude, leave them. I'll be only happy to read it, see if I can do something with it. I'm not promising anything, but the suggestion is always welcome, so I appreciate it. So listen, everyone, take very good care of yourselves. It's 11 o'clock, so you should probably all go get some sleep. And all being well, like I said, I'll see you again on Tuesday. But between now and then, like I said, take very good care of yourselves. Thanks for joining me for a second time today, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Halcyon Show.